Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our show. I'm so happy to have you with us here again, Bill, and we're delighted to be discussing this time the second coming of Jesus.
Yes, we are.
And I asked for this subject, to be honest. I'm really curious to hear.
It's always great when a Jew asks to hear about the second coming of Jesus.
Absolutely. I don't know how common it is, but it is great. So let's go. Tell me a bit about it.
Well, it's a big subject. There are whole, encyclopedias almost written about it. So we're going to try to break it down a little more simple. And of course, you can ask questions and we'll dive in. We'll see where this goes. But of course, there's a foundation to the second coming. And understand who Jesus was and who he is, at least according to the Christian and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? And we've talked about this before, that our belief is that Jehovah of the Old Testament is the Messiah and is Jesus, that he, Emmanuel, God with us, came to earth, was born to Mary in Bethlehem, and had his earthly ministry. And then we believe that following that, his atonement, his death, his resurrection, that there's a second coming. Now, there in the Old Testament, there are lots and lots of references to the Messiah. There are references, as we see it, there are references to his first coming, and there are references to his second coming. And without a lot of scholarly understanding, and as you and I have said before, we're not the major experts on all this, but I have 60 years of study in it, so I know a little bit about it. But it can be easy to confuse the first coming and the second coming, and from the Old Testament references. So we believe that Jesus, when he came to earth the first time, his responsibility, the reason he came was to take upon himself the sins of the world, to make it possible for us to repent. He overcame sin and death, to make it possible for us to be resurrected and to overcome all of those things, and that he experienced life as we experience it. To understand the human experience in order to walk with us and grieve with us and sorrow with us and joy with us. That's why he came to earth. Now, we believe it was necessary for him to go through the death and the resurrection. But in the New Testament, Jesus Christ himself gave a lot of references to when he would return. And he gave a lot of, I guess you could call it clues, if you want to think of it as in detective terms, of how to recognize it, the things that would happen preceding it, why it would happen. So the first time he came was to show us the way. The second time he comes is to rule and reign as Lord of Lords, King of Kings, and to bring in the millennial age. The millennium is something that happens when Christ returns the second time. He will reign over the earth and the people of the earth for 1,000 years.
So it's basically not the end of time when he comes, or is it?
We would say, there's a lot of references to the end of the age, right? They talk about the end of the age. It'll be the end of the age without Christ reigning as the King of Kings. And
So it's the end of humanity as we know it.
the end of the way things have been, right? Then we go into the millennium. The millennium is 1,000 years, and at the end of the 1,000 years is the end of the end. Think of it that way, okay? So obviously, we as Christians and as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints look very much forward to the day when Christ comes and reigns personally upon the earth, and there is peace, and everyone recognizes God and Jesus for who they are, and we there's a lot of work to be done during that time. So that's kind of the big picture of how that works. So any thoughts or questions first? Or I go into
Yeah,
some.
yeah. So I'm wondering, um, do all the deviations in Christianity believe in it in the same way, or is it what you've just told me is the point of view of the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, and I'm gonna try to distinguish that a little bit. As far as I'm aware, all Christian denominations believe that Christ will come again and that he will usher in the millennial age. It's very clear in the Bible, in the scriptures, that that will be the time when the lamb and the lion lay down together. They both eat straw. They don't harm or hurt each other. There's peace. All Christian denominations believe that. Now, there is some variations in how they perceive some of the signs of the times before that second coming. There are interpretations about what happens to the people on the earth at the time of his coming and what happens at the end of the millennium. There's probably some variances. Okay, so I'll explain to you what I'm familiar with that, but also, my views and the views of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Obviously, that's my background. I don't speak for the church, but I have been involved in the church for, a long, long time. So I'm very familiar with it.
So there's a difference between the Messiah according to Judaism and Jesus coming back, also sort of a Messiah, but with a different role to reign, basically.
Right.
And is it true that the belief is that he'll be coming through Mount Olive?
Yes. Yeah. So the way we kind of see it is that the Jews kind of believe that Messiah's first coming is what we would call the second coming, right? That all those things were meant to be with his first coming, whereas we say there were some things in the first, some things in the second. And yes, Jesus, when he was on the earth, told his apostles on the Mount of Olives that he would return. And an angel told the apostles that just as they have seen Jesus rise up to heaven, that he would come back to the earth. And yes, he will, as part of the second coming, come back to the Mount of Olives, as it talks about in the book of Zechariah, when the Jewish people are surrounded in a great battle, and he'll place his foot on the Mount of Olives and it will divide. And the Jews will run in for safety, and he will defend them. Because, and this is a great thing, and maybe some distinction with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that the Jews are the covenant people. God himself, Jehovah, covenanted with the Jewish people, and he keeps that covenant, and he will be their defender and their protector. And we believe in the end that they will recognize him as the Messiah when he comes, and realize that, oh yeah, he is the one that came, because they'll see the marks in his hands and his feet.
So is it the belief that although the Jews are the covenant people, they are basically mistaken for not, acknowledging Jesus as who he is, and at the day of judgment or the second return of Jesus, then the Jews will basically acknowledge their mistake? That's a good way of saying it.
I don't know necessarily that I would use the word mistake, because Ariel, you're a Jew. You didn't grow up being taught that Jesus was the Messiah. You really haven't really considered that as being something you need to seriously weigh in on, right? You are not part of the generation that tried and convicted and crucified him. So anybody who tries to pin that on the Jews of today, that's a mistake, right? The covenant is with the house of Israel, right? The Jewish people are the house of Israel by lineage, we also believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that we can be adopted into the house of Israel by entering into a covenant with Jesus Christ, who is Jehovah, and become part of the house of Israel. Now, a great part of the prophecy, and I think you'll find this interesting, Ariel, is that one of the things that was prophesied to happen before the second coming of Christ is the gathering of Israel. That Israel, the covenant people, would be gathered in from the four quarters of the earth to their land, the land of their inheritance, which has happened and is happening now. So
that's, if I recall correctly, those are basically the beliefs of the evangelists, that once all the Jews come back to Israel, then this will hasten the second coming of Jesus.
yeah, there's a lot of terms of hastening the work, that Jesus hastens the work in the last days.
Mm-hmm.
In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have a lot of scripture that talks about the Jews being restored to their homeland. And I think that's why there's so much excitement, in the evangelical community and a lot of the Christian community, is that we see God's hand at work gathering the people of Israel to Israel, which means to us we're one major step closer to his return. His return to his covenant people.
Will Jerusalem be destroyed before he comes? That's also part of the belief.
That, well, Jerusalem will be surrounded and under siege for sure. Nothing new there. I mean, this has happened through history over and over and over and over again, right?
Yes.
I think the difference is that this time, although there will be great destruction and a great loss of life, as all wars have, and this one will be horrific, that when people think all is lost, the covenant will be upheld and Christ will defend his people.
Although I'm not a scholar in Islam studies, I do find it interesting that even according to Islam, Jesus will be the one leading the battle against, I forgot what's his name, that demon. I think in Christianity it's the Antichrist, but in Islam, something like Jarul or something like that, Jesus will be leading. And I actually think I saw one scholar being embarrassed by the fact that it's not Muhammad coming back, but Jesus coming back to lead the Muslims.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we do know is God will fulfill his words the way he spoke them. We as humans may not understand them or may have interpreted them differently, but he doesn't. He will fulfill them as he gave them. Now, in the last days, we read that there'll be a lot of things that will happen. There will be earthquakes, wars, rumors of wars. The sea will heave beyond its bounds. That the nations of the earth will be gathered against Israel. And, it's not like we can't see that possibility out there. Okay? Be signs in heaven. We in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we believe that Jerusalem, during the millennial reign, that Jerusalem will be the capital of Christ's kingdom, and that he will rule from there, but he will also rule from the New Jerusalem. And the New Jerusalem, it talks about in the Bible as well, but the New Jerusalem will be built in the American continent.
Oh, really? So that's the belief of your specific church, though, right?
Yeah, right. So the concept of Mount Zion and the New Jerusalem is a general belief. Its location, what it means, yeah, that's specific.
Okay. Interesting.
So there'll be two headquarters, if you think about it that way. One in Jerusalem and one in the New Jerusalem.
Nice. Is there a place today that is called New Jerusalem or defined as New Jerusalem?
We know the location
Oh,
of where it will be. Yeah. Um, so, but that that is something that maybe the rest of the Christian world wouldn't consider,
wouldn't
and that's
necessarily agree
okay.
with.
You know, um, but it will be. We believe it'll be a place of refuge as the world is going crazy. That the
Mm,
New Jerusalem will rise up and be a place of safety and retreat for people who are looking for Christ and want to be waiting for Him. But I want to talk about one other thing that's very, very interesting. Because in the Christian world, there is a lot of talk and references to how bad the world gets and how evil the people are as we approach the end. And that is true. There'll be a lot of evil, right? World War II, we saw a lot of evil in the world, and that didn't usher in. So if it's going to be worse, that sounds pretty bad, right? But one thing that we don't think about, at least generally, is, is God waiting for the world to be so ripe with evil that He has to come? Or is He waiting for a people to rise up in righteousness to be ready to receive Him in spite of the evil opposition of the world?
right. There is a belief in Judaism that if all the Jews would simply observe one Sabbath together, then the Messiah would.
And I am a big believer in that if Christ delays His coming, it's because we're not ready to receive Him.
Rather
Because
than waiting for the deterioration of humankind and
He
until
doesn't
there's
want the deterioration of humankind. That's not His goal or ideal. He wants people to turn to Him, and He needs the people to turn to Him. I agree with you, Ariel. Honoring the Sabbath day, big deal. Honoring goodness and righteousness and caring for each other and treating each other with love and respect, big deal. Putting
Absolutely.
God in front of our personal desires and appetites and passions, it's a big deal. You know,
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. So the return or the second coming of Jesus, I know it's mentioned in several places in the New Testament. Is it also mentioned somewhere or implied in the Old Testament? And is it discussed in the Book of Mormon as well?
so this is a sheet of a bunch of the references in the Old Testament.
We didn't prepare for this call together. I just want to mention it. Yeah, those. Oh, we should probably mention that none of the questions here have been
Not
planned.
totally.
Everything is,
We're
like,
pretty much off the hip when we
yeah,
go.
we're playing by ear for
So,
sure.
I've just been trying to, study some different things. And I thought, knowing that you're a Jew, I thought that would probably be something I needed to be aware of. So thank you for asking, right? So, a number of scriptures in Daniel, Zechariah, Isaiah, Malachi, Psalms, Jeremiah make reference to the second coming. Okay. Now, in my research, I found that there is a Jewish perspective to those scriptures. There's an LDS, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, interpretation. Which is probably in line with a lot of the general Christian beliefs. But, Zechariah, I think most of us are familiar with, and when Jehovah fights the nations on the Mount of Olives,
Hmm.
we would interpret that as being reference to the second coming.
Do you have the reference handy? I'll read it in
Zechariah
Hebrew.
14, 3 through 9.
14. All right, gotcha. Oh, all right.
Are you looking in Hebrew or English?
In Hebrew.
Cool.
14. Which verses?
14, 3 through 9.
3 through 9. All right. Okay, so when you say that Jehovah is basically Jesus, right? So verse number 3 starts with Jehovah coming out and fighting the nations, right? Oh, and here we go, standing on Mount Olives in Jerusalem, right? Gotcha. All right, so if you do interpret it, obviously, since the Jews don't interpret Jehovah
Right.
to be Jesus, then they stay with the God interpretation of this part. And if you do, then yeah,
And
then everything that refers.
it's understandable that they would do that. Which one that I wanted to talk about is Isaiah chapter 63 and the verse 1 through 6. So you could look that up if you like, but I want to give some context to this one because when Jesus was on the earth, and Ariel, you can help me with this because you speak Hebrew, right? One of the big things that happened is that right before he was crucified, he went to the Garden of Gethsemane.
Hmm.
And in Gethsemane is where he took upon himself the sins of all mankind. It was a place of suffering. It says that in the New Testament, it says that he bled from every pore. I don't know how you say it in Hebrew, Gethsemane. What does it mean?
Let's see. Um, how do you spell it?
In English,
Gethsemane. Okay.
Gethsamane, I believe.
Gotcha. Gachmanim. Okay. Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay. So it's funny because it is Hebrew. Gethsemane is Gat Shmanim. It's in Hebrew basically. So basically, Gat is how do you translate Gat? Basically, Gat is the place where you either produce wine or can produce oil like olive oil. So it's like the place where you can produce it, right? And so Gachmanim is the place where you produce oils. That's where it is. And so this place specifically during the time of Jesus. Let me see if I can find where it's at directly. So there's a church right there, I know today, right? That sits there. My problem is always translating the Hebrew to English.
We
Yeah.
actually appreciate the fact that you can do that. Makes it much more enlightening for us.
It's actually very interesting um, that the term is literally in Hebrew.
Yeah. And that,
Yeah, so I found the church in Gachmanim. It's this one. Let me share my screen with you.
cool.
Yeah,
So
and this is
Gethsemane,
how it looks.
when they make oil or wine, they have a press, right? And it presses down. So Gethsemane can also be termed as the place of the press. And Jesus would say, he would say, I was in the wine press alone. I trod the wine press alone. There was no one there to help me. So when he was in Gethsemane, it was as if he was being pressed, like in oiled press or wine in Gethsemane, to the point where he bled from every pore as he took upon himself all the pain, the suffering, the sin, which is why in the Christian belief, he was the Son of God. He was half God, half human. Being human, he could suffer. Being half God, he didn't have to die until he chose. So he's the only one that could bear that much agony to the point where he bled from every pore. And if you bleed from every pore, what is going to happen to your clothing?
Gonna get red probably.
Going to get red. And what is the Isaiah 63, 1 through 6 talk about?
So in Hebrew, yeah, I can see what you're talking about. Although, are you talking about the first verse.
One
So the
through
first
six.
verse says, "Who is coming? Who is this coming from Edom, um, from Basra, with his garments stained crimson?"
Yes.
But stained, what does it mean, crimson?
Crimson is red.
Really?
Yes. Wherefore, this is what verse 2 says in English. Wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat. And then he says, I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger, I will trample them in fury. This is, in our view, a reference to his second coming. When he comes, he will be dressed in a red robe, symbolizing that he trod that winepress alone, that he is the one who was in Gethsemane that took upon himself that burden and then was taken to the cross. So that's another reference.
The interesting. So crimson is a way of saying red. It's like another term for red.
Yes. You say
So
a crimson rose, for example.
right. It's interesting because verse number 2, the second verse, explicitly says in Hebrew, "Madua adom lelevushcha." All right. Why is your clothing red? Yeah.
Right.
"Vebgadecha kedorech bagat," and your clothes are like the one who's stepping in that Gethsemane, right?
Right.
But the first verse doesn't say red in Hebrew. The first verse says, "Mize bame Edom," which means who is this coming from Edom? "Chamutz bgadim mibatzra," from Basra, with his garments stained crimson. That's in English, but in Hebrew,
Well,
"Chamutz bgadim."
in English, it actually says with dyed garments from Basra. It doesn't say
Dyed.
it doesn't say red in our first verse. It just says
Oh,
dyed.
okay, so you're reading from
This is the
which Bible?
King
The
James
King
version.
James? All right. So I'm just
We can read
reading
any
from
version.
BibleGetaway.com,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
yours is better. It's interesting. The term chamutz, what was the English term that you used?
Dyed.
Dyed? So dyed is, colored, right? With
Right.
something.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because chamutz in Hebrew means sour, the
Ah,
literal translation, right?
stained, soured, changed, something like that.
Right. But זה הדור בלבושו, robed in splendor. Does it say robed in splendor in your
In verse
version?
1,
Yeah,
glorious in his apparel.
glorious in his apparel. All right,
Yeah.
it's basically the same. It's like you're clothed, you're very fancy in a way.
Fancy, glorious, but why are they red?
Yes. So does it make sense that he bled from all the pores and he was there and he looks glorious? How do you reconcile this?
The red is symbolic of his trotting the wine press. Yeah. It's kind of like communion or the sacrament. When they eat the bread and drink the wine or the water in our case, it's symbolic of his blood. Although there are some Christians who believe it actually changes into his blood, I would believe it's symbolic of his blood. And the red here is symbolic of what he did in Gethsemane, to be recognized for what he did, right? And we could go through. I have a whole.
Interesting. It's interesting to me because the color red at that time was, first of all, very difficult to achieve, to dye with the color red. If I recall correctly, it was at the time of Alexander the Great and even later in the Roman period. In order to dye something with the color red, you actually had to get specific snails from the ocean or something in order to be able to come up with the color red and blue, which were very prestigious colors of that sort.
Cool.
So there's an explanation for the fact that he's dressed in splendor.
He's returning in his glory,
Right.
right? This is his triumphal entry. Like you have the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. This will be his
So it
travel.
doesn't directly correlate to that last day that you told me about in Gethsemane. It's just a reference to the fact that that was the last thing he wore before being crucified or before
It's
walking
a
to the Last
reference
Supper.
to that he is the one that trod the winepress alone. He is the one that was pressed and took that pain and suffering on our behalf. If we would just turn to him, right?
So, is it true that many of the references in the Old Testament, which are considered to be referencing Jesus Christ, are specifically from Isaiah? I know there are others, but is Isaiah like a core book in this regard?
Isaiah has so many references.
Right? So,
It's
Isaiah is like you would say a substantial portion of the references.
substantial. I mean, there's a lot in Jeremiah. There's even some in the Psalms that talk about him. But Isaiah is where the verses are that a virgin shall conceive and bring forth their son. They'll call his name Emmanuel, God with us. That he was, let's see, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. With his stripes we are healed. All that is in Isaiah.
Is
Isaiah,
the term Emmanuel mentioned somewhere else beyond that specific portion?
which part do you say?
Is the name Emmanuel mentioned somewhere else beyond that specific verse? Is it mentioned in the New Testament somewhere?
That's a good question. Let's take a look. Isaiah 7:14, in the Book of Mormon, it's mentioned. Isaiah 8:8, Doctrine and Covenants. I literally have hundreds of references to Emmanuel here. Most in the Old Testament are in Isaiah.
How is it? How is I'm not sure how to translate the term. Is it literally translated the virgin in English?
Yes. I'd be interested to know what it says in
Yeah, that's why I'm saying because it's not.
Isaiah 7:14.
Yes. So let's see what 7:14 says. I think it says Alma, and I'll tell you what it means in a second if I'm right. So, okay. Alma, let me see if I can find a quick translation to English. Is a maiden. Does a maiden mean a virgin?
Maiden generally is a term in English that refers to someone that's not married.
Exactly. In Hebrew. It's not like a teenager, but it's a bit more than a teenager, but not yet a woman
Correct.
or a very young woman
Yeah.
for that matter. But it's also a term of grace. It's like you wouldn't just call a girl Alma in Hebrew.
Yes. And Mary, who it refers to, we believe, in some Christian religions, they even worship her. Catholics do. We don't. Well, we revere her, but we don't worship her, right? But to be selected as the mother of God, the mother of the Son of God, yeah, you would be revered as you. Every term of revere would be used
Interesting.
toward her. Now there are passages in the Book of Mormon, and of course in the New Testament, but in the Book of Mormon there are specific passages of prophets who were given revelation, prophecy about Christ, where they see Mary and specifically say that she was a virgin and that she was the chosen vessel of the Lord to be the mother of the Son of God.
I do remember that when I learned about there's something called the translation of the 70. There was a story about the 72 wise men who were sent to Egypt to translate the Hebrew Bible. There was like this famous Egyptian, counselor or something who decided that he wants the biggest library and he wanted all the books. And they told him, you're missing the Bible of those Jewish people. And then he called upon to be sent those 72 wise people, and they rounded up to 70. And so the miracle happened when they were all positioned in different rooms, and they all ended up with the exact same translation of the entire Bible. And that specific term, alma, was translated as parthenos in Greek, which means virgin.
But they all did it that way.
Yeah, that according to the story, the translation was the exact same translation for all 70 people, which is like a super miracle when you consider the fact that the Old Testament is huge, right? And so in the translation to Greek, it was translated as the virgin.
Fascinating. This is why we love doing this.
Yes,
Because
I remember that part. And actually, there are some things in the translation that a little bit changed the meaning, or not a little bit, changed the meaning of some of the chapters. So there's a story about King Saul after being elected as king. There were some people who were not happy, who were basically cursing at him. And so in Hebrew, it says, and he will be silent. I'm obviously literally translating. Don't take my word for the exact meaning of what it was. So, but in Hebrew, it says, and he went silent, right? And so the next chapter starts with Nachash Amoni, like the another guy coming from the mountains to attack whomever he wanted to attack. But the problem is this: in Hebrew, remain silent. In Hebrew, it says "Vayike macharish." There's the letter chet, right? Or the letter resh is like, it's like a 90-degree angle, kind of. It's one line, 90-degree angle, and a different line. That's the letter resh. If you add just a little bit tiny portion and you end up with something like this, like a line, and it's not 90 degrees, it has something in here, it's a different letter called Dalet. And so, according to the Greek translation, it says, and after a month, that guy, Nachash Amoni, came to attack. It doesn't say that King Saul went silent after all those people cursed at him. Basically, the chapter ends, and the next chapter says, and after a month, this guy came. And this little, tiny little line changes the entire meaning of whether King Saul went silent when people cursed at him, or he did not, and the guy started attacking him after a month. Like, Vayike macharish or Vayike michodesh. It's totally different meaning with just a little line, and only that Greek translation gave away the probably what's really was written there.
Wow.
In the original version. I don't know, right? But that's a good story.
Kind of like that, let's eat grandma, right? If you put
Yes.
the comma between me
Yes.
and grandma, it's totally different than if
Yeah.
you leave it out.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's better off to put the comma after the letter, after eat, rather than the other option. But yes, so that was really, really profound. All right, so let's wrap things up and just tell me, is there any prophecy or estimation of when will the second coming of Jesus take place?
Well, what we know is no one knows the exact day or the time, but we do know the signs that will precede it. So it's near, soon. When we talk about God, soon has completely different meaning than it does to us as humans, right? But the signs are there. It's closer. Every day is closer. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we believe we are in the last dispensation. This is the last roundup. So the end of this age will be the second coming. In Revelations, they talk about the beginning of the seventh seal, which is the millennium, which most believe we're at that point as well. So, yeah, I would say, imminent, but is imminent next year or 50 years?
Or tomorrow?
Tomorrow? I think one thing, I'll end with this. We don't know exactly when it is, but being prepared for it and making ourselves a Zion people that are prepared to meet him. Because, yeah, it may not be the second coming when we meet him. We might get hit by a bus tomorrow, and that's our second coming. That's when we come.
But you do believe that when Jesus comes, the dead will be risen, right?
When Jesus comes, there will be a resurrection of the good people. Yeah.
The good people. That's good.
Not so good people have to wait a while.
Gotcha.
To the end of the millennium. So,
So it's a matter of priority rather than.
yeah, well, everybody will get resurrected, but not at the same time. Put it that way.
Gotcha. All right. Good. Good to know.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great day. There'll be some rough stuff before that. I worry about my friend Ariel in the middle of all of that rough stuff. But hey, it'll be a great day when
Yeah.
it comes.
All right, my friend. So join us again for our next episode where we'll be focusing on the translation of Genesis, or at least a portion of it. We're probably not going to be able to cover it all, but it will be fascinating.
We'll
for
do
sure.
piece by piece. We'll get through a lot
By
of
piece,
cool
piece by
stuff.
piece. All right, great. This was awesome. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.